because of the pace at which investment banking works and the work ethic of people who work there, you kind of know that I'm like, when I became an author, even today people tell me we've never seen authors actually reply to emails within a week. You reply within 10 minutes. Thursday, when she called me to say they said yes and we're going to publish your book, my boss was the only guy next to me. And I turned around and said, hey, they're going to publish my book. And shook hands around the corridor with everybody. I'm like, and then what? That's it, go back to work.
Welcome to In My Previous Life. I'm Jen Wakefield, and I used to be a primary school teacher, but I've since been a stand-up comedian, presenter and writer. In this podcast, we give you a chance to hear firsthand from people who have changed careers from one set pathway to a creative or purpose-led job role. This is not where you'll hear a rags to riches PR story like the ones you find in magazines, but a real, authentic take on what it's actually like to change lanes in your adult life. I'm so happy this week to be joined by Chitra Soundar. Chitra, what were you in your previous life?
In my previous life, I was a computer educator, then turned program manager in an investment bank, and now a writer, author, and a storyteller.
My goodness me. So you've been on a real journey from the beginning. So take us back to your first working role, Chitra. How did that come about?
Well, I was among probably the first bit of generation that moved into computer tech. While all my peers were studying accounting and other engineering, I wanted to study computer science. So as soon as I finished my degree, which was not in computer science, which was in accountancy and commerce, but I had done my computer course along with my uni. I wanted to go and teach. I always wanted to teach.
Okay.
When I was 6, I probably taught my parents, sat them down, and so I decided I'm going to teach computer science, and I taught to adults, like in a proper institute. So that was my first job, and I was younger than my students by at least 10 years.
Wow! Oh my goodness!
Because they were all. So computers are new in the workplace at that time, right? So this is going back to languages like COBOL, which is no longer used today.
Yeah.
It's a mainframe language. So people who are coming to learn are all already in work or having to adopt computers in their lives, or people who are studying along with their degrees.
Yeah, and actually that's how it feels now in a way with social media. I know that a lot of younger people know a lot more than the adults who are supervising them, so it's not that far away from that narrative. But Chitra, was there somebody who got you into that, or was there a moment where you knew you wanted to work with computers?
Yeah, so I can't remember what it's called. It was that BBC, it was like a small home computer that came. And I think our school got like a little demo, so they brought about 5 devices into the classroom. And I used it for the first time, and I said, this is what I want to do. This is logic, and I know how this works, and I know I want to do it. So then I spent my year 8 or year 9, I can't remember, a holiday going and learning a language called Fortran, which was actually at that time used in NASA.
Oh, wow.
It's like a maths and science computer language.
Okay.
That was the only one that they were teaching during out of school hours, during term holidays, and I went and studied with other engineer scientists who were studying it.
How did you get that opportunity? Did your parents take you along?
So I found out that somebody, we have a neighbor who was a PhD in geology, was in that university, in the science university, and he said, they're running this computer course during the summer holidays, but it's for grown-up engineers. And I said, will they let me in? And he went and got exception for me, and then my mom used to keep me in the class, wait outside, pick me up, take me back.
So Chitra, how old were you, and how old were the rest of the class?
I was in year 8 or 9, so probably would have been 13, 14. And they were probably all in their 35s.
Oh my gosh, Chitra, that's unbelievable. That's such a huge detail. But also that tells me a lot about you as a person already, because I feel like that's someone saying, I don't really care about the rules. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And you clearly had that at a very young age.
Yeah. I don't think I probably never followed a rule that I didn't believe in, which was, it's just a headache. If you are a girl growing up in a traditional conservative Indian family in Chennai, which is very, very orthodox, and literally broke every rule possible.
Yeah, that's very inspiring and doesn't surprise me to hear, but I love this story already. I love this story already. So, okay, so you decided to go and do that, and then you were in year 9.
Yeah, and then so when we had to choose our majors, which is, I don't know what is the equivalent called for us, it's the 11 and 12, which is before you pass out of school, before uni. You have to choose your major subjects, and I wanted commerce with computer science because I thought business computing is what I wanted to do. I was not a physics person, I'm not a maths person, although you have to study maths until you finish school. And no school in Chennai at that point had commerce with computer science. They had 5 years later.
Okay.
So I did my commerce and accounting majors, and then got myself evening college, which is like you go at 2:00 and finish at 6:00, 7:00 in the evening.
Okay.
Then I found myself a computer course that I wanted to do, the diploma in the morning. Which at that time was very new. There were only like 2 companies doing this, and it cost 7,000 Indian rupees for the course, which was probably 3 months salary for my dad.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I really need to do this course. And my dad said, okay, if I take my loan out, you might have to pay it back, because he was working for a personal bank and he could take loans out without interest.
Right. Oh, that's
so
great.
He gave me a loan.
Okay.
Then I went and did the course in the morning. So I have to be at the class at 7. So I'll go on my bike for 10 kilometers on the bike, go to class, be there until about 1:00.
Okay.
So we do the class and then we'll do practicals.
Yes.
It's literally after that, it's like a free-for-all. So if you can stand in line and get extra computer time, you can do that. So I'll do that until I have to really literally go to college.
Wow.
And then take my cycle, go to my college, finish college, and then cycle back home in the night.
Gosh, Chitra, so already you've got someone who has got tenacity, knows what they want, happy to break the rules to do it, and loves learning. Clearly you love learning, right?
Learning.
You're a learning, sounds like you're a learning addict.
I still learn. I have a BBC Maestro membership, and I like to go and learn stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can see where how this is leading into the Chitra we have today, but that's kind of astonishing for such a young person as well. I mean, did you feel like there was anyone else like you when you were your age?
No, not really. I think the biggest advantage was my parents absolutely loved supporting our learning, as long as, we were not trying to do other things and we were just wanting to learn. And it's almost like my mom didn't care if we broke the rules, as long as it was good things. They got a lot of flack for it.
Really?
For letting us be whoever we wanted to be.
Like, in what way? What kind of...
I think my mom got told off quite a lot by her family that she's just going off at 7 in the morning, coming back at 7. Do you know what she's doing? Like, she's studying really hard. So she basically asked everybody to step away from it.
Oh, good on your mum for putting that boundary in place and saying, look, this is how I'm choosing to raise my family,
Yeah, and I think all through school, all through uni, my dad pretty much didn't buy anything for himself. Like, he saved up all the money for education.
Yeah.
And I was tutoring other kids right from when I was probably 11 or 12. So I don't know what happened to that money. I'll just give it to my mom. I never, hardly ever. But it was all useful in the skill that I always wanted to teach was there in my head all the time.
But that's so, so unique in that the age at which you realised that was so mature, and clearly your dad and mum valuing education was very clear as a kind of route through for you as well.
Yeah, I think education is the only way out of our situation. Like I think when my dad grew up very poor, but not working class. That's the problem, right? When you're like super poor, but you're not in manual labor, but you are in one, like you're a clerk, or you are, my granddad was a social working homeopathic doctor.
Wow.
So he did not take any money, which means his children had to grow up with nothing. And looked after by all sorts of people. So for him, it was always education is your path out of the situation.
Yeah.
And my mum was not allowed to go to school after she was 15.
Wow.
So for her, it was like, you go however long you want to go to school.
Yeah, she really wanted to make sure you had that. So, so Chitra, take me through to your first job then. When you first started in your role, were you someone who was maybe the youngest, one of the only women? Was that true?
No,
or not necessarily.
No, I think computer education had fairly enough women in it. I got this job to teach computer science. I went and they ask you to teach a demo lesson. I got through that, and then they had another session after I joined. And I completely froze.
Oh, no way.
And I couldn't talk. And they went, but you did the demo lesson really well. And I think by then I was so worried about the expectation. And then eventually I relaxed into it. This was the best part. So I go in, probably a week in. You teach the lesson, that's all fine because you know the subject really well. And after that, then they came and dumped like this printed progress report kind of report cards in front of everybody in the staff room. And then they said, we have to mark attendance for every student, because at this time, computer education was so expensive in India. So parents really wanted to know what their kids were doing in this place, because we don't know whether they'll get jobs even. So we have to mark attendance, we have to mark their lab hours in it, and then we have to send it. And I said, how? They said by hand. So you refer to the registers and you fill this in for all these students, and there were stacks and stacks of stuff. And I said, but we teach computer science. And they said, yeah, but we do manual work.
Oh my goodness. So you were doing all of these by hand, even though you're
they
teaching
did.
computer
I did
science.
not. I refused to.
Yeah,
so I said, that is kind of counterintuitive. And they said, what do you suggest? We've always been doing it like this. I said, that is not a good excuse to keep doing it. So I said, I can very, very quickly make this all automated. Do you want to have a go? And they said, okay, you go write the program. The others will fill in manually this month. And then by next month, we'll see whether you can get it done. And I automated it. And people just have to do data entry of the attendance, and it'll all print it out. And
were they like, thank you, Chitra? You've made our lives so much easier.
They were quite impressed that within the first week I was even brave enough to say, what you're doing is stupid.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't know me.
But Chitra, even though, so for you, it's not a surprise for you to behave in this way, but did you notice how other people would react to you throughout as you started your working life, when you would speak up about things? Or
yeah, I don't think people ever were immediately, oh great, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's always reticence, right? But I think it's a question of logically explaining why.
Yeah.
Which eventually happened to me at home as well, right?
Yeah.
Because when they asked me to get married, I said, I can't logically understand why I should.
Yeah, yeah.
And then had a long argument about it.
Yeah.
So it's that. For me, it's like, it doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not sure I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But then we did that automation, and then I think I joined April, May, and then in India, you get a bonus for Diwali.
Oh, wow.
if because like here you
Like
get
you
an
get your
end of year
Christmas bonus,
bonus,
whatever,
there
yeah.
they'll give you a Diwali bonus, and they gave me a bonus and a hike, and I went back home, and this was like I was making 1/10 of what my dad was making then, but probably 0.001% of what I'm making now. But it was like a huge jump suddenly. It's the first job. And I told my dad, well, I changed all their procedures.
Oh my goodness.
And they think I can run this place and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, so I was always changing things. That was eventually that was useful because that's what my job became. But
yeah, absolutely. But I feel like the essence of that person has been there since you were young. And so you've got this job teaching computer science. Let's move into how did that kind of graduate into where you then were working at an investment bank?
So I moved from that company to another company, which were resellers of Sybase and C++, which was a very big software then.
Okay.
But we were also teaching. And then I was teaching, and then I moved into, again, I completely restructured their placement program. And then I ran out of things to do. I got a national role, and I did the national role, and I had run out of things to do. But at the same time, I think I was about 27 by then.
Okay.
And I was way past my sell-by date, according to my aunts. So they were like, this is getting ridiculous. You should get married. And I was fighting a really hard battle every day.
Yeah, that sounds
to
hard.
keep it away.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing my parents couldn't deal with, because it was like, we have done everything you wanted us to do.
Yeah.
Now this is one thing we want you to do.
Yeah.
And you're not listening. And I said, but what you want me to do for you is my entire life.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
that's not a proportionate response.
Yeah.
So I refused, and it was getting really hard. I used to go to work at 7, came back at 11 most days, simply because I couldn't deal with it.
Wow.
And then it was completely chance. I was coming the 5 floors up and down, coming down the stairs, when one of the guys who had quit and gone to an investment bank in Singapore was coming up the stairs. And he said, hey, my team back in Singapore is looking for programmers. You're good at Sybase and C++. And I said, yeah. And he said, do you want to apply? And I had not even thought about it. So I said, yeah, sure. So I emailed my CV to him. And then they said they want to interview. So I took the interview in somebody else's house.
Because you didn't want to
I didn't want to create panic before there was a cause to panic,
okay.
right? Because it wasn't something that you don't know whether it's going to materialize or not.
Yeah.
So I took the interview somewhere else. And then they had 3 questions. There were 2 people eventually I worked with, 2 senior managers. They had 6 questions. And first 2 was fine. And then they asked a 3rd question in Sybase, which is a database question. And I gave an answer. And this guy was so chock full of himself, and he said, no, that's not the answer, and this is, and he explained it. And I said, but if your answer is right, the result of that data would be this, but that's not what you asked, and this is what you asked, and therefore the answer should be this. And there was silence on that side. And his boss came on the line. And then he asked a few questions. And he became one of my best friends eventually.
Oh, wow.
And then they said, yes, we want to hire you. How soon can you come?
Wow.
And then it was a lot of visa-related stuff, but I left the country in 10 days.
10 days? And so when you were having the interview, Chitra, did you know at that point, did you have any feelings in your tummy where you were like, if this happens, I really want this? Did that become apparent quite quickly?
Yeah, I think it was more a way to leave.
Right.
Because I knew if I needed that distance. I've never lived away from home.
Yeah.
I've never had my own room, right? And
yeah.
I'm 27 years old. And I needed, at that point, I think everything was very fraught, and there was the only way was to leave. And I used to, before that, I used to literally live with a suitcase under my bed.
Wow.
Because what if they force me to get married? How quickly can I walk away from this?
Yeah.
But to their credit, eventually my parents understood. Yes,
that's a challenging thing to live with, where you're exactly right. You know, it sounds like it's one thing you have to bargain away, but really that will impact your whole life. And you sound like a wholehearted person. You put your everything into your things, so it's very difficult to imagine at this stage in your career where you're kind of like you're really rising up to suddenly put like a plug in that and put it on hold for something that isn't even what in your eyes will make you happy.
Yeah, I didn't think, especially Indian arranged marriages, it's really hard to find the right person by matching horoscopes, right?
Yeah.
And if you do find that person, you're marrying the whole family, and it's really hard that you'll get along with such a lot of people, but you don't know them before.
Yeah.
But the worst part is you can't walk away from it after that.
Yeah.
Right? You're stuck. And so for me, that was too big a gamble to take on somebody else's judgment.
100%. And also, like you said, you're quite logical. The logic didn't make sense to you. So
For me, it was a logic. It was like, no, this doesn't work.
yeah. So this was a great way to boost your career and have this exciting career experience, get some experience living on your own, and also to kind of burn that flame of that was kind of sizzling away, where it is this,
Yeah,
it was you had to do something.
Yeah, it definitely was a good thing, because Singapore was my dad's dream destination.
Oh, okay.
So when I got the job and I went and told them they're asking me to come, they're doing the visa paperwork within 10 days, my dad was like, Singapore, great, you can go.
That's brilliant.
And,
so you're
yeah.
so smart, Chitra. You knew you had to pick somewhere that your dad would approve of as well.
it all happened by chance, but
Yeah.
I did not expect that response either. But I would have gone anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like I would have gone anyway, and had no idea of what was coming. Didn't know how to dress for an investment bank, right? You dress differently.
Well, how did that happen? You know, did you go in and just have a good look around and then do a big shop one day, or?
No, it was really weird, because so Singapore has got Tamil culture in it.
Yeah.
So 25% of the population is Tamil, so we know food-wise we'll be okay. The agency which was going to do the paperwork had a place where there was like they had rented an apartment for people they were basically body shoppers.
Okay, right.
So they had a place already, so we know where we're going, but nothing else was obvious at that time. And they only organized the tourist visa, so you have to go there and wait out your employment visa to happen while learning and getting used to the place. And it was very we made lots of weird assumptions, how to wear a suit and how to get a suit made, and all sorts of things like that, but none of that eventually was needed. But
yeah.
you don't know, right? You're going from this quite small South Indian city into suddenly, and I did speak to somebody who was working there, who was oddly also called Chitra, and I had a chat with her and things like that.
She helped like orientate you and
she told, because she was here in Chennai, she'd come for holiday when I was leaving.
Okay.
And weirdly, all the important days in my life happened to be September the 11th.
Whoa.
I landed on September the 11th.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is really...
And a pattern that's continued on, has it?
Yeah, and then after that, a couple of other things have happened on the same day.
So Chitra, so you're... Okay, let's bring it to you being in Singapore now. So how many years were you in this role in Singapore?
I was there only... This is the best part. I was there for 3-4 years. I can't remember. When did I come back? Yeah, 3.5 years. And again, I had done really well, right? I started really bumpy start, bad bosses and all of that. But eventually I was doing 4 different projects. I was coding in different languages. And then I did this amazing project and everything was fine. And then they said, do you want to become not represented by the agency? Do you want to work for the bank itself? They offered, you got in, and then they they would not promote me to the level I deserved because I had done more projects than anybody else, and there were only 2 contractors who were becoming employees.
Right.
And they gave the guy the promotion and not me. And I went and had a chat, and I said, this sounds odd because he's literally written one program that didn't even work and I had to fix it. And I've done all of these projects. What is going on? And they said, well, he's a man, he needs the money. You're single.
Oh my goodness. I've never heard that one before. Wow.
It was a long time ago. And I said, what? And I said, that's not fair. And I worked really hard weekends on this and things like that. And he said, hey, just wait it out. It'll happen eventually, right? And I said, and they were Indian bosses actually. And they were all expats, right? I said, okay, you're not going to, and they needed me to work for the rest of the Saturdays until a certain period. I said, but then you're not paying me for that as well. And they said, well, that's just conditional on you accepting becoming an employee. And I said, okay, fine. You can have that free because your bank is so poor. And I quit. Here is your notice.
Right.
My visa is dependent on that employment, right? But I literally just quit and packed my things.
And then?
And left. I came back to India. Thinking I'm going to write.
So okay, this is the shift now.
No, I was published in. I did my first book in Singapore then. By that time.
Okay, so this is something that I want to ask about in terms of the shift between, because obviously some people will jump from one thing to another. Some people will start something whilst they're still in their main breadwinning job or main career trajectory. So how did that happen for you in Singapore? Did you just write as a hobby or did you take a class? Like, how did that begin for you?
I always wanted to write, so I wrote through school.
Mm-hmm.
I was known as a writer in school. I wrote at uni. I won some prizes throughout, and it
was always fiction.
Not really. I think I wrote poetry. I wrote non-fiction essays.
Okay.
Didn't write a lot of fiction, but I was an oral storyteller, right? So we grew up, my mum is an improv playwright, and my grandparents, we had a joint family, so we lived together until I was in year 9 or 10. My grandparents were with us, like my mom, grandmom, my uncle, my aunt, so they were all with us. And we grew up with oral storytelling. Uh-huh. So I was always storytelling to my cousins and all of that. Then I went to Singapore. I had suddenly Saturday, Sundays off. In India, you don't get Saturday, Sundays off. So you get 6.5 day weeks. So you work 5.5. Some days you'd work 6 days. So it works out to a day and a half off. And then you have to do chores because you live with your family. Right. So I suddenly had time off. And my sister said, how about writing all those stories down that you used to tell us? But I also, even today, this is a problem. Like, I like to write everything. I want to write everything. So I went and tried to write everything. I got my story published. I found a writers' meeting, which was run by the guy who set up the press club in Singapore.
Okay.
Indian guy, Indian Singaporean. And he ran this small writers' thing in his room. Imagine you're going into a strange person's house. You don't know anybody, right? It just said somebody said there is a writers' club and you just land in somebody's house. So I met lots of big writers there, and one of them was the editor of the Singapore Airline magazine. And he said, do you write short stories? And I said, yes. And I don't know, have I written? I didn't know, I just said yes. So then I sent him a story. He published it in the Airline magazine.
Okay.
and a poem.
And was that your first published piece or apart from when you were studying?
School, I probably think so. I think it was probably the first one. And then one of the people who came to that meeting was a publisher. And then they said, we're running this conference kind of thing, do you want to come? And then I went there and I met this lady, and she publishes folktales. And so she said, look, I don't publish normal fiction and stuff, but if you are willing to retell folktales, we can have a discussion. So, I said, I grew up on folktales, I'm very happy to retell stories. So then I decided to retell stories. I think it was 30 stories, and she had, so they're all one-page ones, right? And then she said, well, we can't just publish Indian stories because our Indian population is only 25%.
Okay, right.
So we're going to pair you up with another Chinese in-house writer we have. She's going to write 30 Chinese stories, and then we're going to put together both. I said, great, we're still friends. Like last time I went to Singapore, was it last year I went? I met with her. And I had no idea, right? 30 stories. I told her I can write it in 30 days.
Wow.
And I had a job which had 16-hour shifts.
That's a big target, Chitra, to reach.
I was so the bliss of ignorance, right? So,
but if you have that mindset where you're thinking, I've got all this time off, this is how I'm going to use it.
That's what I did.
That's where you're
sat in my weekend, literally did not go anywhere, just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote.
Were you enjoying it though?
Yeah, it was. I was literally retelling all the stories I had heard or read, but they were all folk tales, trickster tales, and I wrote them down. I finished, and I was like, yes, I finished the book. And then it came on and said, now I'm a writer, I can quit my job. And then when this guy said, you're not getting promoted, I said, here is your notice.
Yeah, you have that sassy film moment, slow motion, handing back your pass card.
I literally banged the door on him and walked out. And it was, in hindsight, probably a very rash decision, because suddenly I had to say my visa will run out literally the day after my notice ends. So I had to get everything ready and leave, and so much things I gave away. My mom is always like, you always decide like this and throw away so much stuff.
Was it a decision, were you quite resolute though, and in that moment?
Yeah, I wasn't willing to work for him anymore after that, because I knew it was going to be like that. Like you can see that how they're going to treat you.
And had the writing, you were doing the writing for a little while, so was that a thought in your mind before this had happened?
No. I think I knew I could write, but I don't think I would have ever been able to support myself with it. But what I thought was, I can go back to India, find a job there and write, or decide. I don't think I had a proper plan.
Right.
I just knew I wasn't going to work for him.
Yeah.
But eventually when I went back to India, and then I called my previous boss, who was a good friend of this guy who I left, and he said they shouldn't have let you go because they had to replace you with 4 people.
Wow. You know your worth, Chitra, though. You knew your worth. So Chitra, we're at this stage now where there is a shift, because whether you planned it or not, you had been writing. It sounds like this part of you has been coming through, and maybe, I don't know if it's a part of you that, because you suddenly had some time to dedicate to this as well, was coming through. You quit your job. Let's look at, we're going to start looking now at this pathway that you took to becoming more of a writer. So how did that happen? I mean, was it a case of working part-time, or did you take another job for a while?
No, I went back to India, and all of the wedding things came back.
Oh, that's horrible.
Right.
And tough.
And I quickly realized I can't live here.
Yeah.
But I did try.
Yeah.
So I applied for a sub-editor's job in one of the national dailies.
Okay, so this is a job in working in
Chennai.
publishing.
In Chennai.
In Chennai.
So I thought I'll do it because I'm going to stay with my parents, right?
Yeah.
So I went and they said, why are you applying for this job? You don't have any journalistic experience. And I said, I can write. And I showed them, because I'd published in a few newspaper. I have written a lot of newspaper opinions in Singapore, and they got published.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was writing for children's magazines. And for some reason, they gave it to me, right? And my first job, I went in, and it was your shift starts at 3 p.m.
Wow, so different.
And finishes at midnight.
My goodness.
I did only one day. I came back, and the next day I rang them and said, I'm so sorry. I can't do this job because I'm a morning person. I can't stay awake. I couldn't even get up the next morning. I was like so distraught. It's like, I've done the wrong thing.
Oh, wow.
And I was so upset with myself for being overconfident and doing something that I shouldn't have, and not being able to fulfill the obligations.
Were you extra hard on yourself because of that high achievement that you had in your life, do you think?
I don't think I like to walk away from things. I like to finish it. And I felt like maybe I would have gotten used to the shift. I'm like, but my mom said, look, if you don't want to go, don't go. Who's asking you to go?
That probably helped, getting that from your mum and thinking, okay, if she feels this, I've got one person's got my back. Who knows me?
I don't think they would have worried, because it's convenient if I'm at home, right? So, to get me married off.
So she was like, anything to keep Chitra here.
So then I realized I needed a job back. Then I spoke to two people. The guy who had hired me, like the contracting company which had who had set me up in the original job, and a friend of my sister's, and I got interviews with both. Mm-hmm. One was back in Singapore and the other was in UK.
Oh, okay.
And the one in Singapore was exactly the same skill set I needed at the first bank. It was a different bank. And the one in the UK was coding in Microsoft Word, which I can do to an extent because I could code Excel and Access, so I know I can code it. And so they said interview. I did the interview on both sides. The first one was a shoe-in. Mm-hmm. The second one, I did the interview. I didn't know the answer to a couple of questions. They were like, oh, okay, but we do want to meet you again. And then we did a second interview. They're all on the phone. And then I said, why didn't I know that answer? So I went and looked it up. I was like, oh, this is what it is. Anyway, left it. Didn't think they were going to call back. They called back. And then they asked the same question again. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, yeah, I didn't answer this last time, but I did look it up and this is what it is. And I know I can do this. And they went, oh, my God. That exactly tells us what kind of person you are. And we definitely want you on the team.
Oh, wow, Chitra. That's so interesting.
But I didn't want to come to the UK at that time. One, because Singapore was familiar, but the job was familiar. It was banking. And this was like a contract job, coding in Word in different places.
Right.
And I was like, I think I'm better off going back to investment banking, because I can build on that skill set rather than having disparate CV.
Yeah,
things.
so you knew that you needed to do something. You'd learned something about what kind of person you are in terms of morning person. I need to be doing a job that feels familiar again. And so you thought, I'm going to continue with the skills that I've got and built on that. So Chitra, take us on a little bit of a 2-minute tour now, if you can, from this role, this second time around in Singapore. Can you sort of take us through a little succession of how that led you to becoming more of a writer?
So when I got the Singapore job and went back, the first thing I told HR guy when I met him was, hey, I'm a writer.
Right, okay.
I have to write on the job.
Okay.
I have to write on the side. So is there a policy against me publishing anything? And he said, as long as you're not writing about the bank.
No children's stories about banking, please.
We don't care what you do in your free time.
Yeah.
And you can make as much money as you want on it. That's up to you and the tax guy. We don't care.
Okay.
So great. I was writing with this particular publisher who published me. I have done a couple of books with them by then. And then I was doing lots of books with them. I was also writing regular columns in their school magazines. They published two school magazines. And I was publishing with lots and lots of US magazines, Australia, New Zealand. So I was writing for all the children's magazines.
I mean, you say I was doing this and I was doing that, but that is quite enormous, doing all of that as well as your full-time job, Chitra.
Yeah,
were you feeling that?
The first job, the first role I took in the new bank was so easy.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never heard.
It was like, I went there.
Thing.
Yeah, I said, why did you hire me for this? You could have just paid me money. I would have done it from that kind of job. It was like, it was done, right? I went there in a week, it was done. And I was like, okay, now they're going to fire me, right? I'm sitting on my hands. I'm not doing anything and I'm bored out of my mind. And I said, can I do anything else, please? Because just tell me, you must have work somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they said, oh, this other guy is working on this. It's very hard for you to learn. I said, show it to me. And then I learned that. I did that. And then slowly I picked everything up. And within, I think I went there in 3 months, the manager said, can we make you permanent? Do you want to come on board? Not through a contractor, but permanently working for us. And I said, great. If you think you can use me.
You wanted to use more of your time. You clearly love
because
work.
I went and took more work that they had not expected a contractor to do.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't sit quietly just staring into my computer for a whole day.
But out of interest, Chitra, why was there any part of you that thought I can use this time to write? Or was it because you were in the office?
So I kept one clear policy. Because of the way your employment contracts are structured, whatever you create at work belongs to them.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not like you can work from home and squirrel away on the clock.
You can have another laptop and be typing, but that would be too obvious. Yeah, right?
Of course.
And I didn't want to write right there.
Yeah.
Because pretty much everything I was writing was speculative, right? I didn't have a writing contract. I had these writing jobs with this publisher, but I wasn't writing my novel or anything like that. I didn't write on the job. It was more like you go there, your 9 to 5 is stuck there.
Yeah, of course.
And you have to
do
something.
You can't be productive.
There were guys who were just sitting around talking about. I didn't realize for a long time. I thought they were discussing their families because they were talking about, oh, she said that and she said that. And then one day I just turned around and asked, are you guys discussing your families? These were grown men. And they were discussing a soap opera, like EastEnders, but in Tamil.
Chitra, I mean, people love stories, on screen and off screen.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting.
No, you're right. I mean, clearly, again, you want to be learning, you want to be useful. And I think this brings it nicely into talking about this ethic from your work ethic is very strong. And so now, let's bring it into now, what you're doing. So you've moved through these roles, and you are now a full-time author, and you're a producer, Chitra, and screenwriter, and creator of one's own show based on one's own books, which is amazing. And so how do you approach this work in terms of what you learned from your previous work?
I think this work two ways, right? One, my work at the bank right throughout was always very creative. I had to solve problems. I had to finish projects, but finishing projects in a very big international bank means you have to pull people together, find innovative solutions, get favors, trade favors, all sorts of people skills, right? It also, because of the pace at which investment banking works and the work ethic of people who work there, you kind of know that I'm like when I became an author, even today people tell me we've never seen authors actually reply to emails within a week. You reply within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I brought all of that work ethic and planning and looking forward, strategizing, all of that with me, I think. And it's also hugely useful I've shifted careers 3 times, and it's super hard to shift into something like screenwriting or being an author after you're 40, because people, like, you can't go and do internships. People don't think you are eligible. Like, it's you have to be out of college to do internships. You can't just go and say, I would like to start as a trainee. For me, even if they let you do it, I don't think I can keep my mouth shut when somebody 10 years younger to me or 20 years younger to me says something that won't work, and I'll say that won't work, and that'll get into a situation, right? But I did. I was telling you the other day, I came to the UK 2006. My job transferred me, so that I wanted to come to London because my sister was living here. And publishing in children's, there are only 2 big capitals in the world, London and New York. And my bosses were based in London. Our division was headquartered in London, and they wanted me to come here. So I came here, and I was writing throughout, but I wasn't getting published. The first book I got published, I got picked up in 2008, and I came out in 2010.
When you say you weren't getting published, do you mean in the UK?
Yeah.
Had you been published in India?
Singapore?
In Singapore
and India by then. But I hadn't published in India. Did I? I got my first book out in India 2008. So when I came to the UK, I wasn't published in the UK. I was published in Singapore with this one single publisher. And that was a double-edged sword. So you're not a new writer. You're not a young writer either. But whatever you've already published is not UK quality. So agents don't want you because you're not their new find, because you've already been writing for 7 years. Publishers don't think of you as a published author because the UK publishing has a huge thing about other books. They don't value everything the same way, right? So it wasn't valued for a long time. But I found my lovely publisher, editor at Walker Books. I met her at an event. And that is the other thing. I was always volunteering with the writing organization. So I was a volunteer with SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. When I was in Singapore, I ran the Singapore chapter. It was a sub-chapter. And then I came here, and the first thing I did was get in touch and say, I want to volunteer. So I always had the network, as in meeting people, knowing other writers. And then that's how this event happened. And we met the editor, and I showed her something. She said, whatever you submitted, I don't like, but I like the writing. Do you want to come and talk? And then we had the first book out.
Oh, wow. How did that feel? Like,
it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And also, you're living alone. Big deal is a very relative thing. What, you're going to jump on your own in the house? But I got the call at work. I was at work, and she called to say, I really like the text. I'm taking into acquisitions, and we'll know. So I said, okay, great. Maybe I didn't know. It'll take a couple of months. She said, no, we'll tell you on Thursday.
Oh, wow. That's quite quick for publishing, it feels like days.
So the acquisition, it took a while to get to acquisitions. But my point was, you could have just called me on Thursday. Why did you tell me today? Now I have to wait until Thursday. And Thursday, when she called me to say, they said yes, and we're going to publish your book. My boss was the only guy next to me. And I turned around and said, hey, they're going to publish my book. and shook hands around the corridor with everybody. I'm like, and then what? That's it. Go back to work.
Such a strange thing, but I know I've definitely had experience of things happening when I remember when I heard about it was like a nomination for something, and I was at school teaching, and I was on my own in this big hall, and I was eating a wrap. They have like, you know how the children have snacks.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had any breakfast, so I thought, I'll just have a wrap for my breakfast. And I got this email, and I was just like, and I didn't know, I just didn't have anyone to tell. It's funny when you're in your other workplace when something happens.
Yeah.
But Chitra, we've got like 2 or 3 minutes now. And so I've enjoyed hearing, so far about this journey that you've been on and seeing these patterns of Chitra and how this has carried through, through your life. And also how your work ethic has influenced how you approach your work now. So how is your life different now to how it was then, if you could sort of sum it up?
Ooh, I'm my own boss.
Yeah. Do you like that?
Yeah, I think I still write. I get up at 4 and I'm at my desk by 6.
Oh my gosh, you really are a morning person. Oh my goodness.
Right, and then I write until 11. So with the TV show happening, it's slightly different to how it was a couple of years ago. But I like to get on top of things, and right. So it's very different. I don't miss my other life at all, right? I would not want to go back to getting up at 9 and going and working for someone else to do something else.
Yeah.
And this is, even though it was a creative work, this is completely different. Like, somebody actually gives you money for your words about things you made up.
That's really liberating, I think, though.
Right?
Yeah.
I never thought I'll make money out of writing, or at least stabilizingly. Like, I always thought, okay, right, I will see for how long I can survive, and if I can't, I can always go back. It's not like people don't want me back on the job. Like, I still got people calling me to say, do you want to come back? And I'm like, no.
And this is what's great about having that skill set, Chitra. But before we sort of wrap up, I always like to talk about finances and how people have funded their journey, because that's a tricky part and something I've had to tread in and out of different jobs or go back to my old teaching job and things like that. So how did you make it work for yourself? Did you phase out your full-time job?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to quit a few years ago, and then my department head said, do you want to quit now, or do you want to take part-time and then stabilize yourself before you quit? And I said, okay, that's a good idea. So I went part-time, 3 days a week at the bank, and then started doing school visits, which was the key thing for me to be a working author, was to be able to do school visits, which I wanted to connect, because I live alone. I want to connect with kids, and I love being with kids. So I did that. But by that time I had chosen to do that, I'd paid off the mortgage, which is the advantage of working in a bank. So I paid off the mortgage. So that was my key criteria. Yeah. And I had worked out how much money I need per month, and multiplied that by 60 months and saved that up before I decided to quit.
And so those months, did you find that you were just really focused on making sure you got that saving? Like, or were you able to still live quite well and rounded?
No, I did all of that before I quit. Right?
Okay,
so then I eventually quit, and then I still had book deals and stuff going on. I had school visits. I'm a very popular school visit author, so I still get loads and loads of school visits. So I quit 2018 full time.
Okay.
I stopped, and then the year 2018 to 2019, I was literally on the road. Wow. I had books come out. I was so busy. I did festivals. I did probably every major festival in the UK. It was such
a busy time. But you'd completely swapped hats by then. And so,
but it was But from a finance perspective, from 2018 onwards, I had taken a 95% pay cut.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I was prepared to live on the savings if I needed to
Yeah.
for 5 years, but I haven't touched it. At the same time, I did cut down, like I stopped my cleaner, and he went, why? Because I'm at home now. I can do my own cleaning. I had to get the cleaner back at some point because I couldn't clean. I was always going.
You're so busy all the time. Yeah. Chitra, I also know, I know that you're someone as well who'll always speak up for and make sure, and you would speak up for others, speak up for what you think is right. And you run Colourful Connections, so you run, am I right that you've run groups before supporting people of colour as well?
Yeah, we did for books. I've set up something called Colourful Bookshelf, which promotes UK-based, UK-born British authors of colour.
Yeah.
And we ran lots of monthly surgeries for authors to come in and ask questions. And then when I came into TV and I got the first TV show and everything, and I realised there was no existing group I could just join, and I had assumed TV was better organised. So I set one up last year during CMC, Children's Media Conference. So yeah, now it's a running group. We have people regularly attending, and
it's amazing to have someone who is like you in the world that we take for granted, that is the person who sets these things up and is the person who speaks up as well. And I think that's a fantastic thing. So thank you for being that person.
You have to hold the ladder for the person to walk up, right? You can't pull the ladder away.
But it's
also
you. 100%. But it's also something I can see has perhaps always been in you, Chitra. And before we wrap up, I want to ask you a final question, which is there anything from your whole journey of going from working, in computers to working in the bank to now being an author and creator, TV producer, anything you would have done differently?
Oh, I have no idea.
Maybe that's your answer then.
Yeah, I think there's no point as well looking back.
So
right? That time is gone.
Yeah.
Right. For me, it's always learn from it, and then you can try your best not to make that mistake again, or do what you want to do. But yeah,
you're a forward-thinking person.
Ideally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when you live alone, it gets very dark.
Yeah, true.
Right? So you just have to go, okay, I made that mistake. Maybe I could have handled a few things better when I didn't want to get married, or when I did this or did that. But you know what? That's part of the growing up. That's hindsight.
Yeah.
Is always, whatever.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But I like that, Chitra. Always look forward is a good philosophy to hold. And yeah, by doing so, you're inspiring others on the way. So thank you for being you, Chitra.
Oh, thank you for having me and you can't shut me up.
No, it's been wonderful having you on
and
hearing about your journey, and thank you.
Thank you.